Hello there, everyone. If you're watching this video, then you are part of the TTOR army, an army that is building itself up one subscriber at a time. As you can see from the title and thumbnail of today's video, today we're going to be dealing with an old Earth creationist that I've never actually come across before, but I've come across with his kind of argumentation before, and that's why we're making a response to this particular guy. The old Earth creationist in question is this fella who goes by the name of Ancient Egypt and the Bible as far as his YouTube channel is concerned, but his actual name is Dr. David Faulk. Now, his video that we're going to be responding to is titled Old Testament Genealogies Are Fascinating. He put out this video a little over a year ago, and it's got over 4,600 views. Not bad for a channel with 5,600 subs. But more about Dr. Faulk before we respond to a clip from this video. Dr. Faulk, as you can see here on the About page of his blog, Egypt and the Bible, is a specialist in ancient Egypt and the Bible. He received his PhD from the University of Liverpool in Egyptology. Then you skip to the next paragraph and it says, David holds 3 master's degrees. He holds an MDiv degree and an MA in Near Eastern and Biblical Archaeology and Languages from Trinity International University, and he has a master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations from the University of Toronto, and his BA in Philosophy is from the University of British Columbia. So this guy has a PhD and 3 different master's degrees, and he's a specialist in ancient Egypt and the Bible. So the idea is that when he talks about the Old Testament genealogies, not only should you listen, but you probably should agree with what he says, because he's just such a super genius. He's just such a knowledgeable fellow that whatever he must be about to say is gospel truth, right? Well, we're about to find out, and as you're going to see in today's video, no, he's lying about, twisting, and manipulating the scriptures to make it support his old Earth creationism beliefs. But let's just watch the video clip, which starts here at the 10-minute and 45-second mark of his video.
And a lot of people look at this chapter and think all we need to do is add up the years of the individuals when they became fathers to get the date of the flood. And if all we did was naively add up the dates, we would have made a mistake, even if all the math were correct.
I'd like to pause right there. And so we saw in the first part of the clip we're looking at, he says that people who add up the numbered genealogies and time spans provided by Genesis and Exodus and 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1 in order to figure out what period of time after creation that the flood happened, he said people who do that are making a mistake and they're naive. Well, Dr. Faulk, the reason why we accept the straightforward reading of the genealogies and time spans provided in Genesis, Exodus, and 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1 and then add the numbers together, the reason why we do that is because God himself commanded us to accept the straightforward reading of those passages. In Numbers 12, 6 through 9 we read, He said, Listen to my words. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. So in this passage, God points out that with certain prophets, he spoke to them in dreams and visions. But he didn't do this with Moses. This is noteworthy because many old Earth creationists will say that God revealed himself to Moses in dreams and visions. But here we have God himself saying he did not reveal himself to Moses in that way. Instead, he spoke to Moses face to face. And he says he spoke to Moses clearly and not in riddles. In other words, God spoke to Moses in a straightforward manner and did not speak in any kind of coded language that you have to interpret in order to ascertain the true meaning. So, when God tells Moses this, Christians like me go, well, if that's how God told us to interpret what Moses wrote. If he spoke to Moses in a straightforward manner and not in any kind of coded language, then the straightforward contextual reading of Genesis and Exodus, the rest of the Torah, 1 Kings chapter 6 verse 1, is the correct reading. And since this is obviously the correct reading of the Torah according to God, that means we can just accept the verses at face value as far as the genealogies and time spans provided by Genesis and Exodus. We can just accept it at face value and add the numbers together because God said he revealed himself to Moses and spoke to him in a straightforward way. What's funny about that is God himself told us that the straightforward interpretation of Moses' words in the Torah is the correct reading, and yet according to Dr. Faulk, if you do that, you're being naive. You're not interpreting the Bible correctly. I wonder who knows how to interpret the Bible better, God or Dr. Faulk? The older of creationists would say Dr. Faulk, but I'm going to go with God on this one. And so now that we know why us naive people accept the straightforward reading of the genealogies in Genesis and Exodus and 1 Kings 6:1, now that we know why we accept the straightforward reading of those passages, let's get into the real argument that Dr. Faulk makes here.
Many assume that Terah lived 70 years, then became father of Abram. The inference is that Abram was Terah's firstborn son. But that is incorrect. Terah was 205 years when he died, Genesis 11:32. But Abram was 75 when he left Harran after the death of Terah, Genesis 12:4. This means that Terah was 130 years old when Abram was born. So then what does this tell us about Genesis 11? It tells us that the age one man began the next person does not necessarily refer to the person being referenced as that son.
So, as you can see in the rest of this clip, Dr. Faulk claims that Terah was not really 70 years old as Genesis 11:26 says he was when Abram was born. What does he do? Well, he argues that Genesis 11:32 says that Terah is 205 years old when he died, and Genesis 12:4 says that Abram was 75 years old when he left Harran. He then arbitrarily and incorrectly asserts that Abram left Harran after Terah died. And so if you subtract 205 from 75, or 205 minus 75, this would mean that Terah was actually 130 years old and not 70 years old when Abram was born. There are multiple problems with this argument that Dr. Faulk is making. The first one I'd like to point out is that Dr. Faulk accepts the straightforward reading of Genesis 11:32 when it says that Terah was 205 when he died, but he rejects the straightforward reading of Genesis 11:26, which says that Terah was 70 years old when Abram was born. He literally accepts the straightforward reading of one verse and rejects the straightforward reading of the other verse, even though they're written in the same style and they're in the same chapter of the book of Genesis. He is literally picking and choosing which verses to accept the straightforward reading of and which ones to reject the straightforward reading of, even though he has no business doing so. He's not supposed to do this, according to William Lane Craig. The other problem with Dr. Faulk's argument here is that if you take his methodology, where he added 60 years to the age of Terah in Genesis 11:26, if you take this methodology to its logical and extreme conclusion, you can start rewriting all kinds of passages in Genesis regarding how old Abraham was when certain events happened in his life. So let me show you what I mean by that. Genesis 11:26 says that Terah was 70 years old when he became the father of Abram. Genesis 11:32 says that Terah was 205 years old when he died in Harran. Well, 205 minus 70 is 135. So technically, Abraham should be 135 years old when Terah died. And If Abraham only left Harran after Terah died, as Dr. Faulk says, then when we read Genesis 12:4, it should say that Abraham was 135 years old when he left Harran and went to Canaan with his family at God's command. Oh, but wait a minute. Genesis 12:4 says that Abram was 75 years old when he and his family set out from Harran and went to Canaan at the command of God. Huh. Obviously, Genesis 12:4 doesn't really mean what it says when it says that Abram was 75 years old when he left Harran to go to Canaan with his family. He was really 135 years old. Oh, but the problems don't just stop there, ladies and gentlemen. Genesis 17:1-2 says that Abram was 99 years old when the Lord appeared to him and basically made his covenant with Abram and said that his son Isaac would be born the next year. Well, following the methodology laid out by good old Dr. Faulk, Abram obviously was not 99 years old in Genesis 17:1-2. Since Abram was actually 135 years old instead of 75 years old in Genesis 12:4, this means that he's really 159 years old in Genesis 17:1-2. Furthermore, Genesis 21:5 says that Abram was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Not so fast, says Dr. Faulk's methodology. Let's just add another 60 years on that. If Abram was really 135 years old in Genesis 12:4, when the passage says he was 75 at the time, then obviously Abram was actually 160 years old when Isaac was born instead of 100 years old. Now, at this point, Dr. Faulk would probably think my argument is absurd, that I'm adding 60 years to the age of Abraham in the instances of Genesis 12:4, Genesis 17:1-2, and Genesis 21, verse 5. But I am literally just taking the methodology that Dr. Faulk applied to Terah and applying it to Abram. And if he's consistent, he would have to say that the entire argument I just made for adding 60 years to the age of Abram in all the passages I brought up, he can't reject that argument because it follows his methodology. But now that we've taken Dr. Faulk's methodology to its logical conclusion, let's figure out exactly what we're dealing with here. Genesis 11:26 says that Terah was 70 years old when Abram was born. Genesis 12:4 says that Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Harran to Canaan with his family at God's command. 70 plus 75 equals 145. This means that Terah was 145 years old when Abram and his family set out from Harran to Canaan at the command of God. Furthermore, we notice that Terah is not listed as the people who went with Abram from Harran to Canaan, and Genesis 11:32 says that Terah was 205 years old and died in Harran. Therefore, we logically conclude that Terah spent the last 60 years of his life in Harran before he died there. That's the logical conclusion we would come to based off the biblical data. Notice how I accepted the straightforward reading of all these verses, and I figured our way around this problem that Dr. Faulk is trying to create here. Dr. Faulk has two problems here with this argument in short. One is that he arbitrarily rejects the straightforward reading of one verse, but he accepts the straightforward reading of the other verses in order to make his argument. The other problem is that he arbitrarily asserts that Abram only left Harran for Canaan with his family after his father Terah died, even though, as you could see from what I demonstrated, no such thing is stated by the scriptures, and if you actually look at the text carefully, you'll see that Terah was actually 145 years old when Abram left from Harran and went to Canaan. Dr. Faulk may hold himself out there as this super intellectual authority figure who should be trusted when he talks about the text of Scripture, and he may have multiple master's degrees and a PhD to his name, But the fact of the matter is that he is deliberately lying about, twisting, and manipulating the scriptures and what they mean in order to justify his old earth creationism beliefs. And this is par for the course for basically every old earth creationist apologist on the internet and in the world. Their entire worldview is grounded on reinterpreting the Bible in light of what the majority opinion of the scientific and academic community says, especially in regards to origins and the age of the earth and universe. Their entire worldview is based on reinterpreting the Bible, especially the Torah, in order to squeeze their billions of years belief into the text. Of course, when you do a careful and honest analysis of the text, you see that their arguments don't work. They fall flat, and when you actually analyze the text carefully, you realize old earth creationist apologists like Dr. Faulk are a bunch of liars who don't tell you the truth about the text of Scripture because they have ulterior motives, and the Bible is not the ultimate authority in their lives. Now, I know that Dr. Faulk has a more recent video on his channel talking about the 7 deadly sins committed by YouTube apologists. And basically, I fall into that category, even though I technically upload to way more video sharing sites than just YouTube. But he would look at someone like me and look down his nose at me and basically dismiss what I have to say because I don't have multiple master's degrees and a PhD like he does. But the fact of the matter is that anyone who seeks to do the will of God and who seeks to understand what the scriptures actually say when they're read in a straightforward and contextual manner, any such person, no matter what their educational background is, they can refute the arguments of people like Dr. Faulk and his master's degrees and his PhD. Just because he has all these degrees does not mean he is right in everything he says. And when it comes to his argument about Terah in Genesis 11, he is obviously and blatantly wrong. He couldn't be more wrong if he tried. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked what you saw and you want to help me go from being a part-time to a full-time content creator, then I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button, check out my other videos, and leave your likes and comments down below. And it doesn't matter whether you're seeing me on YouTube, or Joshu TV, or YouTube, or NewTube, or BitChute. The concept applies to them all equally. And if you'd like to follow me on my various social media accounts, I would encourage you to check out my Tap My Bio profile, where I have links to all of the social media sites that I have accounts on. If you'd like to help me preserve freedom of speech on the internet, there are 2 ways you can do this. You can join and use my website Creation Social, which is an open source alt-tech alternative to Facebook and Gab. Lots of great conversations happen here. You have true freedom of speech with very minimal drama, which I think is the best of both worlds. And if you like using Facebook at all, then you should definitely use Creation Social. If you want to help me create a video sharing site of my own, I would encourage you to donate to the Quarter Project. Quarter is an open source alt-tech alternative to YouTube that I am currently working on raising funds for. It's going to be a site that is very feature-rich and functional, and it will have pretty much all the features you'd ever want in a video sharing site, and all of the freedom of speech that you would want as well. So you can contribute to the Quarter Project either through my GiveSendGo campaign, which you can see here on screen, or you can donate to the Quarter account on Flattr, where you can do one-time or monthly tips. And everything you do as far as Flattr donations go or GiveSendGo campaign goes will go towards the Quarter Project. And if you'd like to help fund TTOR or the Creation Social and or Quarter projects, then you can purchase products from my Teespring store, where we have TTOR merch, we have Creation Social merch, and we have Quarter merch. And you'll find the link to that in the description box below as well. You can also help fund me by buying and reading my books. There's another Inconvenient Truth, What Secular America Hates, and there's another Inconvenient Truth too, Defending Young Earth Creationism. You can find access to these books on the TTOR website. Thank you for watching, and have an excellent day.